What up, guys? The Bench Buddies are back with our college football Week 7 top 25. But before we get into it, hit that subscribe button, get us to 200 subscribers. We'll be doing that autograph item giveaway. But as always, we have Ty with us here, our college analyst, and soon we'll be doing our college basketball videos. So make sure you guys are subscribed to see those. But before we get to the top 25, we're going to look at the four that dropped from our rankings. And Ty, out of these four, which one, surprises you the most here?
I mean, for me, I would say LSU since I picked them to beat Tennessee and they just got absolutely dominated on their home field. A lot of tough games coming up for them, so you could see them really fall maybe 6-6 by the end of the year. Washington is a team that I think benefited from high expectations for Michigan State after beating them. Turns out they weren't good. Now it turns out Washington's not good.
And then you have only BYU staying from that list and on this others receiving votes here. I'll start with probably the biggest surprise of the year is either Illinois or North Carolina right now with only one loss. I think, after Sam Howell left, North Carolina was pretty much written off. And Illinois, they're probably the story of the Big Ten and, the other side of the Big Ten, obviously, where someone's got to win that side. And it's looking like it's either them or Minnesota right now for the front running. And they're the right now heavy favorites for that, and they have a fairly easy schedule for the next few weeks. But Ty, other than those teams, what do you think is the most, shocking here?
I'm gonna go bold prediction I'm throwing out there. On conference championship weekend, Texas will be ranked in the top 10. That I just see them winning at least all, or I'm gonna say they go at least 9-3 going into that, but I think they're gonna win out and be 10-2. This team just looks really scary right now. As long as Quinn Ewers can stay healthy, I don't know if I see them losing in the Big 12. They have Oklahoma State coming to them, so lots of chances for them.
And I'll let you start here at 25.
Yeah, Baylor holding strong here at 25 at 3-2. Disappointing start, but if you look at their schedule, they have a lot of favorable games coming up for them to get to 6-2 or 7-2. So should be an easy win this week. It's just whether the offense can get things rolling for them.
At 24, we get Kentucky, and this team, well, they missed their starting quarterback, and that's pretty much all you can really say about this Kentucky team. Yes, they lost by 10 at home to a decent South Carolina team, but they also shot themselves in the foot as well. They fumbled, a blocked punt, missed field goal, and an interception late. Pretty much just let you know that nothing went their way in this game. But their backup did pretty well, I thought, and he put themselves in position to get at least a comeback or possibly a win. But unfortunately, they couldn't get it done. And now they get another tough game this week against Mississippi State. And if they get Will Levis back, I think they have a good chance to win this game. But if not, I think they might be falling out next week.
All right, the Coastal Carolina Chanticleers come in at 23. Not a super impressive win this week, but they're 6-0. They're one of, I think, like 15 unbeatens remaining. So you got to give them a little bit of respect here. Grayson McCall still at quarterback. He's the guy that quarterbacked their undefeated team in 2020. A lot of experience on this roster, and I think they have a good chance to run the table this year.
And at 22, their division rival in the Sun Belt, you got James Madison, and they're sitting here at 5-0. And I think the storyline for this team is their defense. They held Arkansas State to 20 rushing yards, while they're constantly putting up at least 500 plus total yards a game. And with a very favorable schedule, these two, I believe, play each other the last game of the year. So that could, decide pretty much who wins the Sun Belt if everything goes according to plan for these guys. I think if you're picking an early favorite to win that conference, it's got to be James Madison just because of how dominant they've been so early.
All right, Cincinnati jumping to 21 here. Another grinded out kind of win for them as they struggle to a win over South Florida, but that's what this team does under Luke Fickell. They just find ways to win. Last year, obviously going undefeated until the playoff. This year, they're 5-1 with only a loss at Arkansas. So another really solid year, and I would peg them as the early favorites right now in the American.
At 20, we're keeping the Jayhawks here. Tough loss at home to TCU. Everything was riding on this game for them. And Jalen Daniels obviously went down, but Jason Bean stepped in and didn't miss a beat. Threw for 4 touchdowns, 1 interception, a costly interception. But I think the big thing is the possible 3rd and 4th down no calls that Kansas did not get. And, you could have easily called the defensive holding, but it seems like the refs just missed this one. of course, at the worst timing. And I'm not blaming the refs, obviously, that Kansas lost this game because it was back and forth shootout. But unfortunately, it kind of came that way. And I'm sure Kansas fans are kicking themselves in the foot this week.
All right, Kansas State, ugly, ugly win over Iowa State, but they move up to 19. Still just that one bad loss to Tulane. But it's a 5-1 team. Adrian Martinez finally putting all his talent together, something he could never really do at Nebraska. But this team's finding ways to win. That's a good road win against a really good team in Iowa State. And if you take out that Tulane loss, this is potentially a top 15, maybe even top 10 team at 6-0. So I think they're a team you got to watch out for and really up for grabs Big 12 right now. It's just whether Martinez can stay consistent.
18, we have the Mississippi State Bulldogs with their very dominant win over Arkansas. Kind of surprised me a little bit. I thought it would be a little bit of a closer game, just because we really haven't seen this good of an offensive production out of Mississippi State yet. But Will Rogers came through, had a great game, almost 400 yards and 3 touchdowns. And I'm liking this team. If they can go on the road in Kentucky, get that win, this probably is turning from a dark horse in the SEC West to one of the favorites to possibly play in that game. Obviously it's the SEC and stranger things have happened. And sooner or later, this team could probably be 5-4 just because of how tough the SEC is. But we're going to have to check back next week to see where this team ranks.
All right, Utah taking a big fall here to 17. I, for one, did not see this coming at all. I thought Utah would go in there and handle their business and beat what I thought was an inferior UCLA team, but that was not the case. It's another road loss for them. That Florida loss isn't looking good now, and now you have this one. So they're only 4-2, and now they have number 6 USC coming in. I think it's an absolute must win this week for Utah. All the expectations they had to start this season. I think a 4-3 start would be a really bad road to go down for Utah. So I'm pegging this as a must win, even against a really good USC team. But if they get the win, they can get back on track. Still only one conference loss, so there is still hope for Utah, but got to win this week.
16, we got Syracuse moving up just due to the fact that some teams obviously fell behind them. But I think the big question moving forward is Garrett Shredder and how his play. He hasn't really played awesome, if you want to say that, for Syracuse, but they're 5-0 here, and now they're finally playing a good team and stingy defense with NC State. If they can get to the quarterback early, they make it really tough on you to even run the ball and get your first read. So we're going to really see what this Syracuse team is made of this week against NC State.
And at 15, we have those NC State Wolfpack. I'm just going to say it. They should not have won that game against Florida State. But the rankings don't care about that. It's about who comes out with the win and who comes out with the loss. But obviously, there was an ugly interception thrown by Jordan Travis when they were in field goal range. But that doesn't matter. NC State gets a big win at home and they get to 5-1. Devin Leary got hurt in the second half. So it's going to be a question whether he can play in that big game at the Carrier Dome on Saturday. And if he can, then I think they have a good chance to win this game. Their defense is going to keep them in every game. It's just a matter of whether the offense can hold their own, which at times has been a struggle for them.
14, we have Wake Forest, a team that, still is reeling, I think, from that Clemson loss. I think that's just going to come back and bite them. And, maybe they get revenge in the ACC championship game just because, how they did it this year, where it doesn't matter what division you're in, they're taking the 2 top teams. So maybe they get revenge on Clemson then, but obviously that is at least a month and a half away and things can change, but they're heading into a bye week. I think pretty happy with where they are. Didn't lose any games they shouldn't have lost to. And the only game that really they should have lost was probably that Clemson one. But here they are, 5-1, sitting at 14. Sam Hartman's back, and that was the big question mark heading into the season. Would he be healthy? But he's back, playing better than ever. And if you're a Wake Forest fan, you got to be happy where you're at right now.
All right, UCLA takes another big jump this week after a huge program win over Utah. Chip Kelly finally putting everything together. You always felt he was, he was kind of far away in my opinion, even after last season, but now he's right there, 6-0 on top of the Pac-12. Some tough games ahead, but right now you got to give UCLA a lot of credit. That's a really big win that I didn't see him, but it just shows the talent of quarterback Dorian Thompson-Robinson. He's really putting all his talent together this year. throwing the ball, running the ball. And I think UCLA's now a really big threat to win the Pac-12, maybe even get to the playoff.
Well, we have TCU with their big win on the road at Kansas. And how do they get rewarded with an even tougher game with Oklahoma State coming to town? And we're really going to see what TCU is made of this week. I know we kind of said that again last week, but in Kansas, and now you get a tough home game. TCU, kind of got bailed possibly at the end with no penalties called. But if you get a look at this team, look at that offense, the quarterback over 300 yards, Quentin Johnston, 14 receptions for over 200 yards. And, they score a touchdown in the last 2 minutes of the game, milk the clock, and the defensive stops to get out with the win. So if you're TCU, I think it's the rejuvenation of these Horned Frogs. It's been a while since they have been in this kind of position since I think 2018. So they kind of fell off for a little bit, but they're back looking to prove themselves. And for sure, if they get a win this week, they will definitely be in our top 10 next week.
All right, the Oregon Ducks just keep climbing after that first game. Now 5-1, another dominant win this week over Arizona. Bo Nix, it's been 4 years, and he's finally looking like a quarterback that's not going to make a huge mistake any second. He's looking like he's really found a home in Oregon, and I think he's definitely one of the top quarterbacks in that conference. Oregon's defense is still playing well, and if you take out the Georgia game, which obviously was really ugly, this would for sure be a top 10 team. So now it's 5 wins in a row. And I think right now, I might say they are the best team in the Pac 12, but obviously there's a long way to go and a lot of games to be played. But right now, you got to watch out for the Ducks.
And at 10, we got Penn State. Last week was bye week, but this is where it comes down to all the marbles, essentially, not for just the Big Ten, but for these Nittany Lions. Sean Clifford, will this be his first coming out game of the year and possibly of his career? Because it seems like he's been injured or playing through an injury when a big game happens. Well, now he has no excuse. They don't have that many other injuries on offense, and they're going to Michigan on the road, big noon kickoff. What more can you ask for Penn State? Go in there for the maize out. And if you can get a win on the road here, well, you're probably a top 5 team come around next week, especially, with that win on the road. But you still got to play these games, and Michigan has a very stingy defense up front. And if you can't run the ball against Michigan, then good luck trying to pass because they get to you quick. But if Penn State can figure something out, don't be too shocked if they walk out of there with a victory.
All right, Ole Miss drops a spot to 9. It looks like a dominant win by the scoreboard, but it really wasn't. They struggled for a large portion of that game against lowly Vanderbilt. I'm still not very high on this team, to be completely honest. I know Jackson Dart lit up the stat sheet. I think this team has a lot of glaring weaknesses. We were saying last week they won that game against Kentucky, but probably should have lost, had a lot of fortune go their way. So this week they should beat Auburn and get to 7-0. So I mean that speaks for itself. But there's a lot of tough games ahead, and unless they fix their issues, they're going to be really tough for them. So we'll see if they can get their issues figured out.
At 8, we got Tennessee moving up a spot with a big win on the road at LSU. And this team, they just keep proving it every week that they might be putting Alabama on upset watch for sure in this week. Because one, Tennessee has played a lot better, I think, these last few weeks than Alabama has. Tennessee is very versatile. Hendon Hooker obviously can run for 100 yards and then throw for 100, or he can throw for 300 and run for 50. But he's always going to keep the defense on their toes. And once Tennessee has gotten a lead this year, I don't believe they have given it up other than the Pitt game where it went to overtime. But other than that, I mean, this Tennessee team, if they win this week, I mean, I'm, constantly repeating it. They're definitely moving up. Obviously, beat number 2 team at home. You're looking at a top 5 team for sure next week.
And the Oklahoma State Cowboys moving up to number 7 or staying at number 7 this week. Kind of a struggle against Texas Tech, a home game where they really needed a late score just to put them away. But that's still a solid team that they were taking on. So no harm in that. They get to 5-0. And this week they have a really big task going to TCU. I think this team, the experience for Oklahoma State is going to play a big factor in this. You already saw that when they went to Baylor and got a win. So I think the experience of Spencer Sanders plays a big factor in this game. And I think it's a game that they can go on the road and get out of there with a win.
At 6, we got USC staying put. A good win against Washington State at home. But this team, it wasn't too spectacular. It was pretty close in the first half, and obviously Washington State didn't score a single point in the second half. So the defense stepped up in the second half to really put this game away. But Caleb Williams didn't have one of his best games this year, but he did just enough to get with the victory. And now they're going into Utah, which is, coming off of a loss, and they're looking to avenge that to keep their Pac-12 title hopes alive. But if USC can go in there, win that game, I think it's going to be USC. Oregon is pretty much going to be maybe UCLA. We don't know yet, but one of those three teams would probably be in the running for at least a share of the Pac-12 title.
All right, number 5, we're keeping Michigan outside of the top 4 for now. Kind of a struggle there in the first half. Really struggled with penalties, really struggled to run the ball. But the second half, they really just put the game away, especially with their D line really just getting home. 6 sacks in that game by 6 different players. That was the difference. And they kind of just coasted on offense to a 21-point win, but it was a lot closer than the score. So I'm just hopefully going to chalk it up to potentially looking ahead to this week's Penn State game. Huge home game, their biggest game of the year so far, and it's a huge make or break game for Michigan and Penn State. Both of those teams haven't had a super tough game yet. Both 6-0, looking to really establish themselves in the top 5. So I think it's a huge opportunity for Michigan, and the big difference for me is going to come with the defensive line. Can they get home against that weak offensive line for Penn State?
At 4, we got Clemson staying put, and right now I think the 4 and 5 is kind of tied. Clemson, didn't really do anything too spectacular. Where Michigan, played a good game on the road, had to face adversity and escaped. But, this Clemson team has won 12 games in a row dating back to last year. This team, they struggled in the first half, but they didn't let them score in the second half as well and put up 21 unanswered. Held him with 34 rushing yards, and DJ Ucla is, finally breaking out of his shell and really showing what he can be and the starting quarterback that we all thought he would be. Tough road test at Florida State, who is reeling from 2 straight losses. But, this is kind of upset brewing, if you really want to talk about it. Florida State, they've played a lot of teams close. I think their 2 losses have been by a total of 11 points. Obviously flip the script. They win those games. They're 6-0 as well. And we're talking about a ranked matchup here. But this Clemson team, they're going to have to prove it every week from here on out just because everyone's going for them. They know they're the top dogs in the ACC. And one stumble can really almost vault you out of the ACC title game if all the other teams keep winning.
All right, Georgia drops a spot here to number 3. Not really to any fault of their own, but just mainly because the teams in front of them are doing their part. It was a dominant win against a really bad Auburn team. Now you get a really bad Vanderbilt team coming in. So it's really been a pretty easy road for Georgia outside of Oregon up until this point. They have a lot of tough games ahead of them. But as for right now, I think maybe that Missouri game was just them getting a little tired of playing these really lowly teams, or maybe they have some glaring issues. We won't really know until 2 weeks from now when they play, I think, Kentucky. Yeah, just not a lot of tests right now for Georgia. The defense is just, absolutely dominating as they should, but we'll find out a lot about them coming up.
And at 2, you're looking at the Alabama Crimson Tide. So if you got this far into the video, you're probably a little shocked here. We are not biased like the AP poll is and coaches poll. And you got Crimson Tide really on the ropes last week. And I mean, you could almost say, though, it was their own fault. They had a very bad game, probably the worst game I've personally seen since I've started caring about college football in the Nick Saban era. 4 turnovers, 2 missed field goals, and they didn't have Bryce Young. But I think it was more of a precautionary thing. Why throw him out there in a game that, will mean more next week against this Tennessee team in Knoxville? But Jalen Milroe, he did his part. Didn't do too much good, I guess you could say, but he had 3 touchdowns, lost 3 fumbles, but he did have 83 yards as well and really commanded the offense well. And other than his miscues, I think Alabama is looking like they will be fine next year. If this is the preview, if he can clean up a few things, Alabama, is just going to be a top 5 team yet again next year.
And at number 1, we have Ohio State, proving that we are not biased. We see the dominance of Ohio State dominating Michigan State. No one really is surprised by that. But this offense is still playing without Jackson Smith and Jigba. I don't think that gets stated enough. Everyone talks about how dominant the offense is, but they don't even have potentially their best player, not even best wide receiver, but he might be the best player on that offense. So it says a lot that they're still scoring, I think, over 45 a game to start the season. Bye week this week. Eventually, here in the next few weeks, they go to Penn State in the whiteout. So that's when we'll really find out a lot about Ohio State. But we were saying they're really the only team in the country that hasn't had a close game. I mean, you had the 11-point win over Notre Dame, but outside of that, they've just been absolutely dominant.
And that's going to be it for our video today. Make sure you guys check out our picks video, our NFL power rankings, all those other good videos. And stay tuned for later this month, our college basketball power rankings as well, preseason. But until the next time, the Bench Buddies are out.
She never called back.